The morning started like any other on the human colony world of New Eden. Children played in the schoolyard while their parents worked in the nearby agricultural districts. The settlement had been peaceful for over 2 decades, far removed from the galactic conflicts that plagued other systems. That tranquility shattered when the Kethvar raiding ships descended from the cloudy sky. Commander Zexthul watched through the viewport as his warriors rounded up the small humans. The Kethvar had built their empire on slave trading, and human children fetched the highest prices in the black markets of the Outer Rim. Their adaptability and intelligence made them valuable commodities for wealthy collectors across the galaxy. "Secure the young ones first," Zexthul commanded through his communication device. "Leave the adults for now. We only need enough cargo to make this raid profitable." The Kethvar warriors, standing nearly 3 meters tall with chitinous armor-like skin, moved through the settlement with practiced efficiency. Their weapons hummed with energy as they corralled 43 children between the ages of 6 and 16 into the cargo bay of their primary vessel. The human adults watched helplessly from behind energy barriers, their cries and pleas falling on deaf ears. Among the captured children was 12-year-old Marcus Chen, whose parents had moved to New Eden to escape the corporate wars of Earth. He held the hand of his younger sister Emma, whispering reassurances even as fear gnawed at his stomach. Near them stood Sarah Williams, a 16-year-old whose athletic build and defiant glare caught the attention of several Kethvar guards. The alien traders had made one crucial miscalculation. They assumed human children would be as docile and terrified as the offspring of other species they had enslaved. The Kethvar had successfully raided dozens of worlds, collecting young beings from peaceful civilizations that had never known real conflict. They expected tears, cowering, and complete submission. Instead, they found something far more dangerous. As the ship lifted off from New Eden's surface, the children huddled together in the dimly lit cargo hold. The Kethvar had provided minimal life support, just enough to keep their merchandise alive during the journey to the slave markets. Metal restraints bound their wrists, and energy fields prevented any movement beyond a few meters. "We need to get out of here," Marcus whispered to the group. His voice carried a determination that surprised even himself. "My dad taught me about ship layouts when we studied colony defense protocols." 8-year-old Tommy Rodriguez looked up with tears in his eyes. "But they're so big and scary. How can we fight them?" Sarah crouched down beside the younger children. "My grandfather was a military instructor on Earth. He taught me that size doesn't matter if you're smart about it. We need to think like humans, not like prey." The children began to organize themselves with a coordination that would have alarmed their captors had they been paying attention. Instead, the Kethvar crew celebrated their successful raid in the upper decks, already counting the profits from their human cargo. Marcus had inherited his father's technical aptitude and quickly identified weaknesses in their containment system. The energy field generators operated on a rotating frequency that created brief gaps in coverage every 23 minutes. Meanwhile, Sarah used her knowledge of anatomy to teach the others about Kethvar physiology, pointing out vulnerable spots she had observed during their capture. "Their joints bend differently than ours," she explained quietly. "The knee area is exposed, and their necks have a soft spot where the armor plates separate." 14-year-old James Park, whose parents were both engineers, examined the restraints binding their wrists. "These locks use a magnetic system," he whispered. "If we can create enough electromagnetic interference, we might be able to disrupt them." The human children possessed something their captors had never encountered in their previous raids: a survival instinct honed by millions of years of evolution on a world where humans had clawed their way to the top of the food chain. Earth had been a harsh teacher, producing offspring who carried the genetic memory of ancestors who had faced down predators far larger and more dangerous than themselves. As the ship traveled through hyperspace toward the slave markets, the children refined their escape plan. They organized into teams based on their individual strengths. Marcus and James would handle the technical aspects of breaking their restraints and accessing ship systems. Sarah would lead the physical confrontation when the time came. The younger children would serve as distractions and lookouts. Their captors remained completely unaware of the brewing rebellion in their cargo hold. The Kethvar had enslaved dozens of species over the centuries, and not once had their young captives mounted any resistance. Most spent the journey in catatonic terror, making them easy to manage and transport. But humans were different. These children carried the legacy of a species that had never accepted defeat, never learned to submit. They were the descendants of beings who had survived ice ages, plagues, and countless wars. Their DNA sang with the memories of ancestors who had faced extinction and emerged stronger. The first sign of trouble came when the ship's internal sensors detected unusual electromagnetic readings from the cargo bay. Second Engineer Kliktar investigated the readings personally, expecting to find a minor equipment malfunction. What he discovered instead would haunt his nightmares for the rest of his very short life. The human children had not only freed themselves from their restraints, but had somehow accessed the ship's internal communication system. They had been listening to crew conversations for hours, learning about ship operations, crew schedules, and security protocols. More terrifyingly, they had been planning. When Kliktar entered the cargo bay, 43 pairs of human eyes turned toward him with an intensity that made his exoskeleton crawl. These were not the frightened, broken spirits he expected to see. Instead, he faced a group of young predators who had spent days preparing for this exact moment. Marcus stepped forward, no longer the terrified child who had been captured days earlier. "We want to talk to your captain," he said in perfect galactic standard, having learned the language by listening to crew communications. Kliktar reached for his weapon, but Sarah moved faster than his nervous system could process. Her grandfather's combat training proved its worth as she struck the vulnerable joint in his knee, sending the massive alien crashing to the deck. Before he could cry out, James had already activated the electromagnetic pulse device they had constructed from salvaged components, disabling his communication equipment and weapon. The children swarmed over their captor with coordinated precision that would have made a military unit proud. Within seconds, Kliktar found himself bound and gagged, his own restraints turned against him. But it was the look in their eyes that truly terrified him. These were not the desperate actions of panicked children. This was a calculated assault carried out by young humans who had inherited the tactical brilliance of their species. As alarms began to sound throughout the ship, the human children prepared for the next phase of their escape plan. They had studied their captors, learned their weaknesses, and now they would teach the Kethvar the most important lesson in galactic history: never underestimate the children of Earth. The ship's captain received the emergency alert just as his crew was preparing to dock at the slave markets. Unknown to him, his valuable cargo had become something far more dangerous than he could have imagined. The human children were no longer prisoners. They had become hunters, and their prey was a ship full of alien slavers who had never faced an enemy quite like humanity's young. Captain Zexthol cursed in his native tongue as emergency lights bathed the bridge in crimson warnings. The cargo bay sensors showed impossible readings, multiple life signs moving freely throughout sections that should have been sealed and secured. His most experienced engineer had gone silent, and the electromagnetic interference made communication with the lower decks nearly impossible. "Sir, we're detecting organized movement patterns in the cargo hold," reported his sensor operator, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "The human juveniles appear to have escaped containment." Zexthol's mandibles clicked together in disbelief. In over 30 years of slave trading, he had never encountered resistance from captured children. Most species young remained paralyzed by fear throughout transportation. The idea that human children could organize an escape seemed absurd. "Send a security team to recapture them," he ordered. "Use stun weapons only. Damaged merchandise brings lower prices." What the captain failed to understand was that his security team was walking into a carefully prepared ambush. The human children had spent their time in captivity studying every aspect of their prison. They knew the ship's layout better than some of the crew members, having mapped air ducts, maintenance shafts, and emergency systems through careful observation and deduction. Sarah crouched in the ventilation shaft above the main corridor, watching through a maintenance grate as 4 Kethvar security officers approached the cargo bay. Their massive forms moved with confident swagger, energy weapons held casually at their sides. They expected to find cowering children hiding in corners, not a coordinated resistance force. Marcus had positioned himself at the cargo bay's main control panel, fingers dancing over the interface with surprising skill. His father's engineering lessons proved invaluable as he rerouted power systems and manipulated environmental controls. With a few keystrokes, he could plunge entire sections of the ship into darkness or flood corridors with superheated steam from the engine cooling systems. The younger children had proven equally resourceful. 10-year-old Lisa Martinez used her small size to crawl through maintenance tunnels, gathering intelligence on crew positions and sabotaging non-critical systems. Meanwhile, 14-year-old David Kumar applied his knowledge of chemistry to create improvised flashbang devices from cleaning supplies found in storage compartments. When the security team reached the cargo bay entrance, they found the massive doors sealed shut. The control panel flickered with error messages in multiple languages, including perfect Kethvar script that taunted them with phrases like "access denied by superior intelligence" and "perhaps try asking nicely." "Blast it open," ordered Security Chief Vorthak, his pride wounded by the mockery. The Kethvar had built their reputation on fear and intimidation. Being defied by human children challenged everything he believed about their supremacy in the galaxy. The moment they raised their weapons to breach the doors, the children's trap activated. Marcus triggered a cascade failure in the ship's gravity generators, sending the security team tumbling helplessly as artificial gravity shifted between 0 and double normal strength. In the confusion, Sarah dropped from the ceiling vent, landing on Vorthak's back with predatory grace. Her grandfather's combat training had included lessons about fighting larger opponents. She knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum confusion without permanent damage. The security chief crashed to the deck as his nervous system struggled to process the precise blow to his neural cluster. His weapon clattered away, immediately claimed by 12-year-old Amy Foster, whose farm background had given her excellent hand-eye coordination. The other security officers found themselves facing an enemy they had never trained to fight. Human children moved with unpredictable speed, using their smaller size to dart between legs, climb over backs, and attack from angles the Kethvar couldn't defend against. Within minutes, all 4 aliens lay unconscious or restrained, their weapons confiscated and their pride shattered. On the bridge, Captain Zexthul watched his security feed with growing horror. The humans moved with tactical precision that suggested military training, but these were supposed to be civilian children from a peaceful colony world. How could juveniles display such sophisticated combat coordination? "Sir, they've accessed our computer systems," reported the communications officer. "They're sending messages throughout the ship in our own language, demanding to speak with you directly." The captain's translator crackled to life, carrying the voice of Marcus Chen. The 12-year-old's words were calm and measured, spoken in flawless galactic standard with an accent that somehow made them even more chilling. "Captain Zexthul, my name is Marcus Chen. I represent the 43 human children you attempted to kidnap and sell into slavery. We have taken control of your cargo bay. neutralized your security team, and gained access to your ship's primary systems. We wish to negotiate our immediate return to New Eden." Zexthal's crew exchanged nervous glances. The idea of negotiating with their own merchandise seemed absurd, yet the children had demonstrated capabilities that defied everything they knew about captured slaves. "This is impossible," the captain muttered. "They're just children." "How can they have overpowered trained warriors?" His question was answered when the main view screen activated without authorization. The human children had somehow gained access to the ship's communication systems and were broadcasting from the cargo bay. What the crew saw challenged their understanding of predator species dynamics. The children stood in formation with military-like precision. The younger ones flanked the sides, while the older teenagers occupied center positions. Their human features seemed alien and threatening in ways the Kethvar had never noticed before. Their eyes held an intensity that spoke of intelligence far beyond their apparent years, and their movements suggested coiled violence ready to strike. Sarah stepped forward, her athletic frame somehow managing to look dangerous despite her youth. "Captain, you have 10 minutes to begin course corrections toward New Eden. If you refuse, we will be forced to take more aggressive action to secure our freedom." The threat from a 16-year-old girl should have been laughable. Instead, it sent chills through the bridge crew. Something about the humans was fundamentally different from other species they had encountered. These children possessed a quality that transformed them from prey into predators, and the Kethvar were beginning to understand why human adults were so feared in galactic conflicts. "Sir, they've accessed our navigation systems," reported the pilot. "They know our exact location and have calculated the most efficient route home. They also appear to have identified our destination at the slave markets." Marcus appeared on screen again, his young face serious beyond his years. "Captain, we know you were planning to sell us to collectors on Theta Station. We've also accessed your financial records and understand the significant investment you've made in this operation. We're prepared to offer you an alternative that might prove more profitable than slavery." The captain leaned forward despite himself. The children were not only demonstrating military capabilities, but also showing business acumen. They understood that simple escape might not be enough if the Kethvar could simply pursue them or seek revenge against their families. "We know about the human military contracts available in this sector," Sarah continued. "Earth is actively recruiting allied vessels for exploration and defense missions. The pay scales are considerably higher than slave trading profits, and the work is actually legal under galactic law." The children had done their homework. During their captivity, they had accessed the ship's data banks and discovered that the Kethvar vessel was actually in severe financial difficulty. The crew hadn't been paid in months, and their last several raids had yielded disappointing profits. They were desperate enough to consider legitimate alternatives. But what terrified the crew most was the realization that these human children had orchestrated their capture and interrogation of the security team specifically to gather this information. They weren't just escaping. They were conducting a complex intelligence operation with goals that extended far beyond simple freedom. As their deadline approached, Captain Zexthal faced an impossible choice. He could attempt to retake his ship from a group of human children who had already proven more tactically sophisticated than his trained warriors, or he could admit defeat and negotiate with his former prisoners. The decision was made for him when the ship's engines suddenly shut down. Marcus appeared on screen one final time, his expression carrying a confidence that belonged on the face of a seasoned military commander, not a 12-year-old child. "Captain, we've taken control of your propulsion systems. Your ship is now dead in space until you agree to our terms. I suggest you consider our offer carefully. We humans have a saying: don't judge a book by its cover. You assumed we were helpless children. We've proven that assumption incorrect. The question now is whether you're intelligent enough to learn from your mistake." The silence on the bridge stretched for several heartbeats before Captain Zexthul realized the full scope of his predicament. His ship drifted powerless in deep space, while 43 human children held all the cards. The irony was not lost on him that his hunters had become the hunted, and his merchandise had transformed into his captors. "Sir, incoming transmission from New Eden Colony," announced the communications officer, her voice barely above a whisper. "It appears the human children have established contact with their home world." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Colonel Maria Santos, the colony's military advisor. Her expression carried the controlled fury of a parent whose cubs had been threatened. Behind her stood a gathering of colonists whose faces reflected a mixture of relief and barely contained rage. "Captain Zexthul," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "My name is Colonel Santos, former Earth military intelligence. I believe you have something that belongs to us." The captain's throat constricted as he recognized the implications. The human children weren't just random colonists. They were the offspring of former military personnel who had settled on New Eden after completing their service. This explained their tactical knowledge and organizational capabilities. "Furthermore," Santos continued, "I should inform you that your current position has been shared with the Earth Defense Force Patrol Group, currently operating 2 systems away. They are already en route to your location and should arrive within 6 hours." In the cargo bay, Marcus monitored the bridge communications while coordinating with his fellow prisoners. The children had transformed their containment area into a command center that would have impressed professional military operators. They had established secure communications with home, mapped every system on the ship, and prepared contingency plans for multiple scenarios. Sarah approached the communication panel where Marcus had been conducting negotiations. "The Earth Patrol ships will have questions about why we didn't simply wait for rescue," she said quietly. "We need to make sure our actions here don't cause diplomatic problems." It was a level of strategic thinking that went far beyond their years, yet came naturally to children raised by parents who had served in humanity's expansion into the galaxy. They understood that their escape was more than personal. It could have implications for human-alien relations throughout the sector. "I've been thinking about that," Marcus replied. "What if we turn this into an opportunity rather than just an escape? The Kethvar need money, and Earth needs allied vessels for exploration missions. Maybe we can solve both problems." On the bridge, Captain Zexthul listened to his crew's increasingly panicked reports. The human children had not only disabled their engines, but had somehow gained administrative access to every system on the ship. They could monitor all communications, control life support, and had even changed the passwords on the captain's personal quarters. "Sir, they're requesting permission to address the crew directly," reported the communications officer. "They say they have a proposal that could benefit everyone." Against his better judgment, Zexthul authorized ship-wide communications. The image of Marcus Chen appeared on screens throughout the vessel, but the 12-year-old who faced the camera bore little resemblance to the terrified child they had captured days earlier. "Crew of the Kethvar vessel Shadow's Edge," Marcus began, his voice carrying surprising authority. "My fellow humans and I understand that your ship is facing financial difficulties. Your recent raids have been unsuccessful, crew pay is months overdue, and your captain has been considering increasingly desperate measures to avoid bankruptcy." The accuracy of his assessment sent murmurs of shock through the crew. These children had not only escaped, but had conducted a thorough intelligence analysis of their captor's situation. "We also understand that the Kethvar people have a long history as traders and explorers before economic necessity forced you into illegal activities," Sarah added, stepping into view beside Marcus. "Earth is currently offering lucrative contracts for experienced crews willing to assist in exploration and research missions in the outer systems." The offer was unprecedented. Instead of demanding punishment for their captors, the human children were proposing a path to legitimacy and profit. It demonstrated a level of mercy and strategic thinking that challenged everything the Kethvar believed about human nature. James Park joined them on screen, tablet in hand, displaying financial projections. We've calculated that a standard Earth exploration contract would yield approximately 3 times the profit of your average slaving operation, with significantly reduced legal risks and operational costs. The crew exchanged glances of disbelief. Not only had these children escaped captivity, but they were now offering business consulting services to their former captors. The situation had moved so far beyond normal parameters that the Kethvar had no reference point for how to respond. Captain Zexthul found himself in the unprecedented position of considering career advice from his former prisoners. The children's analysis was correct. The Shadow's Edge was facing bankruptcy, and his crew was becoming increasingly restless about unpaid wages. Legal exploration work with Earth would solve multiple problems simultaneously. "There is one condition," Marcus continued, his expression becoming serious. "Any agreement would require Captain Zexthul and his crew to testify before Earth authorities about the locations of other slave markets and the identities of buyers who purchase children. This information would be used to shut down other operations and rescue additional victims." The demand was shrewd and revealed the true depth of the children's planning. They weren't just seeking their own freedom, but working to prevent future kidnappings. It transformed their escape from a simple rescue operation into a strategic strike against the entire slave trade network. Before Zexthul could respond, his sensors detected the approach of Earth Defense Force vessels. 3 heavy cruisers dropped out of hyperspace with weapons powered but not targeted. A clear statement of strength tempered by restraint. The lead Earthship opened communications, and Admiral Rebecca Harrison appeared on screen. Her reputation was legendary throughout the galaxy as someone who had never lost a battle and never abandoned personnel under her command. "Captain Zexthul, I'm Admiral Harrison of the EDF Vengeance. I believe you have 43 human citizens aboard your vessel. I'm here to collect them and to discuss your future with the families you've terrorized." The captain's options had evaporated entirely. He faced overwhelming military force, but more troubling was the realization that the human children had orchestrated this entire situation. They had turned their captivity into an intelligence-gathering operation, their escape into a recruitment opportunity, and their rescue into a potential rehabilitation program for their captors. "Admiral," Marcus interrupted, appearing on the communications channel. "Captain Zexthul and his crew have agreed to provide information about slave trading networks in exchange for consideration of Earth employment contracts. We believe this arrangement serves everyone's interests better than simple punishment." Even Admiral Harrison looked surprised by the diplomatic sophistication of the 12-year-old's statement. She had come prepared for a rescue operation and possible combat, not to find that the prisoners had already negotiated their own release and proposed a solution to regional security problems. The aftermath would become a legend throughout the galaxy. The Kethvar crew of the Shadow's Edge became the first reformed slavers to work for Earth, their intimate knowledge of criminal networks proving invaluable in dismantling the trade that had terrorized peaceful systems for decades. Captain Zexthul eventually earned a commendation for his role in the largest slave liberation operation in galactic history. But it was the children who became the real legends. Their coordinated escape, tactical brilliance, and diplomatic innovation demonstrated that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or military might. It was their ability to turn any situation into an opportunity for growth and positive change. The story of 43 human children who turned their captors into allies spread throughout the galaxy, serving as both warning and promise. It warned potential enemies that humans were dangerous at any age, from any background, under any circumstances. but it also promised that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't violence. It was their irrepressible ability to find hope, opportunity, and redemption even in the darkest situations. Years later, when Marcus Chen graduated from the Earth Military Academy as the youngest strategic commander in history, reporters asked him about the lessons learned during his captivity. His response became required reading in military schools throughout human space. We learned that the difference between prisoner and captor isn't about strength or weapons. It's about who refuses to accept defeat and who's willing to turn enemies into friends.